experts urge those eligible to get a booster jab. US lawmakers pass a landmark $1 trillion infrastructure package. And more than 90 people were killed in a Sierra Leone oil tanker explosion. Good evening. Health experts have recommended that people intending to receive the COVID-19 booster jab should do so as soon as possible. They say those with higher antibody levels are more protected against COVID. Kina Chu has our top story.
2 jabs and 6 months later, coronavirus immunity is starting to wane among the early takers of COVID vaccines. Starting next Thursday, authorities will start offering a third COVID booster shot to targeted groups. They include those aged 60 or older, immunocompromised individuals, and members of other high-risk groups. Regardless of what vaccine they've received for the last 2 doses, takers of booster shots are free to choose whether to be jabbed by BioNTech or Sinovac. One thing though, people are likely to produce more antibodies by going for BioNTech. Earlier, Chief Executive Carrie Lam said more antibodies do not necessarily mean better. Experts say there is no set standard yet as to what's adequate when it comes to antibody levels. They said, however, that by possessing more antibodies, people are less prone to contracting the virus. The longer-lasting effects of BioNTech would also mean a 4th booster shot can wait. As for those opting for Sinovac, they may require another supplementary shot following dose 3 6 months down the road. Kata Chu, TVB News.
The city reported 7 new imported coronavirus cases. 5 of the patients are fully vaccinated, all but 1 asymptomatic. The 2 unvaccinated patients are an 11-month-old baby boy who arrived from the US and a 2-year-old girl who arrived from Pakistan. Both tested positive during quarantine. Among the remaining cases, 2 are foreign domestic helpers who arrived from the Philippines on Thursday. Overseas, Pfizer has claimed its experimental antiviral pill for COVID-19 is 89% effective at cutting the rate of hospitalization and death. The US pharmaceutical giant joins competitor Merck in the race to bring an easy-to-use oral medication against the coronavirus. Merck is waiting for approval from the US Food and Drug Administration, and its pill has already been approved for use in the UK. Alan Buckner reports.
Pfizer says it will immediately ask the FDA and international regulators to authorize its pill for use as soon as possible.
Exciting news. I would say they are exciting and great news for humanity. And they were clearly not within the expectations. They were above expectations.
In fact, the clinical trial went so well that independent experts recommended halting the study early. Participants were unvaccinated and considered high risk for hospitalization because of existing health problems. Treatment began within 3 to 5 days of initial COVID symptoms and lasted for 5 days.
So this means people can have these pills ready to go in their medicine cabinets, and if they then discover that they're symptomatic with COVID and they test positive, they can start taking the pills right away and not have to go into the hospital.
So is this the answer for people who refuse to get vaccinated? Pfizer's CEO scoffs at the notion.
That's completely irrational, and those that they will do that, they are making a very big mistake. They should get vaccinated so they will not get the disease. These are treatments. This is for the unfortunate who get sick, but this should not be a reason not to protect yourself and to put in danger yourself, your household, the society.
There's also the question mark as to whether the pill reduces the risk of long-haul COVID, where people experience symptoms for months afterwards.
So I don't know if it will protect against long-haul COVID. Getting vaccinated greatly reduces your chances of getting COVID at all. And if you don't get COVID, you're not going to worry about long-haul COVID.
Possible FDA approval for the Pfizer pill could take weeks or even months. Alan Buckner, TVB News.
In the US House of Representatives, Democrats were able to set aside divisions to pass a $1 trillion bill on highway, broadband, and other infrastructure improvement.
It will be a phenomenal achievement for our country to say we're not leaving anybody behind. This rule vote tonight is the beginning of the delivering of that promise. It is actually because the Democratic Party is together on this.
The House passed the measure by a 228 to 206 margin. The approval came after the Democrats resolved a months-long standoff between progressives and moderates. About a dozen Republicans supported it, while about half as many Democrats opposed it. The legislation is expected to create legions of jobs and improve broadband, water supplies, and other public works. The Democrats had planned to pass both the infrastructure bill and the party's shrunken $1.75 trillion social spending package, but failed to advance the latter. In Africa, an oil tanker exploded near Sierra Leone's capital, killing more than 90 people and severely injuring dozens of others. Large crowds had gathered to collect leaking fuel after a bus struck the tanker in a suburb east of Freetown. The explosion took place soon after. The mortuary at a local hospital reported 92 bodies had been brought in. About 30 severely burned victims were not expected to survive, according to a staff member in the intensive care unit. It's not known how many people were undergoing treatment for burns because patients were brought to other hospitals as well. Meanwhile, thousands of young campaigners marched through the streets of Glasgow demanding urgent action against climate change. They want global leaders attending the United Nations COP26 summit to take concrete measures to address the matter. Peter Gaveas reports.
Protesters in Glasgow rallied during the United Nations COP26 climate change conference, demanding world leaders do more to combat climate change. Youth campaigners have been skeptical about political will among world leaders.
It is not a secret that COP26 is a failure. It should be obvious that we cannot solve a crisis with the same methods that got us into it in the first place. And more people are starting to realize this. Many are starting to ask themselves, what will it take for the people in power to wake up? We are tired of their blah, blah, blah. Our leaders are not leading. This is what leadership looks like.
Former U.S. Vice President Al Gore, who shared the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize for his work informing the world about climate change, was also stern in his words for those attending COP26.
We are now experiencing the consequences of the climate crisis in every part of our world. The scientists warned us that these consequences were coming. Too many did not pay careful enough attention to those warnings. We must put the period of delay and distraction and expedience in the past, recognize that we have entered a period of consequences, and make it a period of solutions.
Earlier this week, close to 24 countries pledged to try to phase out coal, albeit over the next 3 decades, and without China.
We're talking to China here, and we've been meeting for several days to figure out, is there a common ground? Is there a way to try to move forward? There's a sense of urgency in delegation after delegation, and I hope that will continue and translate into a goodwill that brings out a very strong decision at the end of next week.
China is the world's largest current emitter of climate-wrecking fossil fuel emitters, the United States second, and Russia in the top 5. China's been beefing up coal production to control soaring prices as it tries to ensure sufficient winter stockpiles for power plants and heating suppliers. The focus at COP26 is for delegates to agree on plans to keep the average rise in global temperatures to within 1.5 degrees Celsius. Negotiations go into full swing next week with ministerial-level talks. Peter Gaveas, TVB News.
Friends, family, and former colleagues gathered at Washington National Cathedral to honor Colin Powell. The soldier diplomat rose from humble beginnings in the Bronx to become the first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He later served as the first black U.S. Secretary of State. The funeral of former U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman and Secretary of State Colin Powell drew attendees from all across the American political and military spectrum. Among them were former U.S. Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama, and former Secretary of States James Baker, Condoleezza Rice, and Hillary Clinton. Former Defense Secretary Robert Gates and current Chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Army General Mark Milley were also in attendance. President Joe Biden was present, but 2 recent presidents did not attend, including Bill Clinton, who was recovering from an infection, and Donald Trump, who had been the subject of criticism from Powell. The eulogists were Madeleine Albright, Powell's predecessor as the US's top diplomat, former Deputy Secretary of State Richard Armitage, and Powell's son Michael.
As I grew to know him, I came to view Colin Powell as a figure who almost transcended time, for his virtues were Homeric: honesty, dignity, loyalty, and an unshakable commitment to his calling and word.
To honor his legacy, I hope we do more than consign him to the history books. I hope we recommit ourselves to being a nation where we are still making his kind. For as he said in his autobiography, his journey was an American journey. Colin Powell was a great lion with a big heart. We will miss him terribly.
Powell died on October 18th from COVID-19 related complications at the age of 84. He had been fully vaccinated against the virus, but his immune system had been compromised by a type of blood cancer he had been undergoing treatment for. Powell served in the US military for 35 years, eventually being appointed as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1989 and becoming Secretary of State in 2001. Powell's credibility took a hit in February 2003 when he made the case for war in Iraq at the United Nations, citing intelligence that was later found to be faulty. Still, after leaving government, he became a globally prominent elder statesman and founded an organization aimed at helping young disadvantaged Americans. Back locally, the nomination period for the upcoming Legislative Council election will end on November 12th. An announcement on who is eligible to run will be known before the end of the month. Caleb Lung tells us more.
Originally scheduled for September last year, the electoral polls will be held December 19th. The Candidate Eligibility Review Committee, chaired by Chief Secretary for Administration John Lee, will be responsible for reviewing and confirming the candidate's eligibility. Factors to consider will include if the candidates comply with the requirements and conditions for upholding the Basic Law and swearing allegiance to the SAR. The results will be announced no later than November 26th. Lee stressed that with the improvement of the city's electoral system, it is most important that people who harm Hong Kong's interests are not allowed to enter the governing establishment. The nomination period, which began October 30th, will conclude November 12th. Here is an update to the nomination list. Martin Liao is seeking re-election in the commercial second functional constituency. As for the Labour constituency, Lee Kuan Yew has opted to join the race. He will be running against Kwok Wai Keung, Dennis Leung, and Chow Siu Chung. As for the geographical constituencies, Hong Kong Island East has added Edward Leung of DAB as another candidate. Other nominees in the constituency include Ng Chao Pei and Liu Tin Shing. Holden Chow is seeking re-election in New Territories Northwest. New People's Party's Dominic Lee opted to run in New Territories Northeast, while Gary Chen is also vying for a seat in the same constituency. Then there is the Election Committee constituency. Ma Fong Kwok, who previously represented the Sports, Arts, Culture and Publication, has decided to run in this riding for the upcoming legislative term. Other new nominations received for this constituency include DAB's Chen Kwok Kwan, Elizabeth Kwok, Chen Hoi Wing, and Lillian Kwok. As for the Hong Kong Federation of Trade Unions, it is sending Kingsley Wong, Alice Mack, Luk Chung Hong, and Choi Wing Keung to run in this constituency. Former lawmaker Chan Hoi Yan, as well as registered electrical worker Diu Sing Hong, are also running in this sector. More information about the candidates can be found on our website and mobile app. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
The Democratic Party has received 50 complaints about online shopping scams. The cases involve losses of up to $2,600. Sharon Tan reports.
The complaints involve victims who make purchases on social media between July 2019 and October this year. The products include oysters, durians, hairy crabs, and printers. Upon their purchases, scammers would ask them to pay by means of electronic payments such as FPS. However, they never got the items, their social media accounts were blocked by the page, and the sellers were no longer reachable. This victim said she initially had no intention to buy durians, but the advertisements kept popping up on social media, so she thought she'd give it a try. The victims also noted these social media pages had no negative comments, and the items were sold at an unreasonably low price. The accounts would often identify themselves as businesses that are about to shut down, and instead of having a business bank account, consumers will be asked to pay to a personal account. Ramon Yun, spokesman for the party's consumer rights policy team, noted that out of the 50 complaints received, only 10 of them filed a report to the police successfully. He added some officers would suggest to the victims to give up, saying it's too hard to trace. The party also reminded customers not to determine the credibility of a social media page by the number of likes it has. That's because there are always fake accounts that can help boost these figures. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
There were more celebrations of the city's Olympic success at Hong Kong Disneyland this afternoon. On hand were Hong Kong athletes including cyclist Sarah Lee and table tennis players Minnie Su and Du Hui Kim. They paraded around the theme park on floats, greeting excited spectators as they went. Commissioner for Sports Young Tak Kung was also in attendance. He said Hong Kong will be organising a number of large-scale sporting events next year. He added that he believes the city will carry on with its sports craze. And tonight's winning Mark 6 numbers are 30, 50, 40, 41, 42, 49, and the extra number is 21. And let's take a look at the weather before we go. It will be sunny and warm. Temperatures will range between 23 and 29 degrees, but are expected to get colder from Monday. And that's the news. Thanks for watching, and good night.